Welcome back to the Consciously Creating Your 2025 Online Summit. I'm very happy, blessed, and excited to introduce you to my dear friend, Lesley Buchanan. And she does some really cool work, and I will let her share that with you. But I am so excited because we're going to kind of go outside of the box of what you would normally expect. In this summit with the other speakers, because Lesley is a class on her own. So Lesley, welcome to the summit.
Thank you, Sam. I'm happy to be here. So what I do is I do genealogy for people, and I consciously help them find their ancestors, which is part of the healing with their past.
Absolutely. Tell everybody your tagline, because it's my favorite.
Putting flesh on the blood of your I can't even say it now. Putting flesh on the bones of your ancestors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such cool work that you do, because I think when we can better understand who we are on a deeper level, it helps bring things into perspective of where we're at in this space and time, when we have a better understanding of where our line has been.
I have worked for 20 years in the death care industry, and I have found that all major events that happen in your life that have a negative connotation, not the happy birthday party ones, but anything, divorce, death, loss of something that was even something that was important to you, just an item, all has grief associated with it. And if we don't properly manage that, that's the things that get us down and drag us in the end.
Yeah.
So we can't move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Lesley's graduated to be my friend now, but for the last 6 months, my family's heard her speak referred to as my new friend Lesley. And then one of them was like, okay, it's been a little while. She doesn't have to be your new friend anymore. But Lesley and I met in Lilydale and stayed up way past bedtime because we just kept chatting and synchronicities coming into place. And you guys will get to hear more another time. I'm thinking Lesley and I will probably record some of the journey a little bit around one of my ancestors, Cassie Chadwick. And it was just so cool when we were up that night, just rhyming back and forth between connecting with spirit, bringing it in, and then you getting an intuitive hit and researching it. And oh my goodness, it was just so much fun. So if that's what your clients experience, I just can't even imagine how much fun you guys have with the work you do.
Well, you know what? Death should not be dreary.
I agree.
Nor preparing for it, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're leaving a legacy.
Yes. And you know what I actually call it? Graduating. Because we're not actually dying, we're just transforming into the next space, right?
Yep.
So I often refer to it as a graduation.
Yep, that's a nice way to look at it. I mean, no nursing home ever records a death. They've just gone on to a different place.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. Now, as we're talking about death and transformation and all of that stuff, I think it's fair to say that over the past several years, as a collective, as a whole society, we've been through lots of transformations. And I think now people are kind of coming out of that and saying, okay, so I'm ready for what's next, but I don't necessarily know what the next thing is. What are some of the things that you're aware of or noticing around the transformation? Oh my goodness, I'm losing my words too. I wonder if the book's void right now. Transformation that our society and world is going through.
Our society, we're in a huge flux right now in our society, not just politically, but there's so much war happening in our country, and everybody's just in such an upheaval that, like, it doesn't sit peace inside your soul. And I think that I think one thing that they fear and that they feel is fear, because they're scared of what is down the pike for them, right? They don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. This position of fear versus hope seems to be a really big power play right now. And that's really part of why we're having this summit, to help call forward the hope, because we can consciously create which directions we're headed, right? Even when we don't
And
know where the shore is, we know there is one. So navigating towards that.
well, and I think what we ourselves embrace is that we have to embrace the hope and let go of the fear. So that, because when we have fear, it radiates out in our space to the people around us. And then we attract people who are fearful as well. Where if they kept their hopes high, their energy, vibrating higher, then they would bring in the similar people. And you want to surround yourself with like-minded people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so what are some of the things that you do, Lesley, to help you stay in that space of hope and focus for what's of your highest and best?
One of the big things that I do is I don't watch a lot of news.
Me neither.
Because you know what? I just glance at the headlines. I don't want to keep engaging with the negative over and over and over again. I spend a lot of time outside walking, just enjoying nature, because you know what? That should teach us everything we need to know about the world, is standing outside and watching the trees bend in the wind and learn, how important that is. When a gale force is happening, if we learn to bend in the wind, we'll stay strong.
Yeah, I love
and I love my flowers, so that's another thing that I inside and outside.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So,
Where you live geographically, I lived there for a year, as you know, and I used to
yeah,
love to take my work, and I don't think it's there anymore, but in Sparta, there was this place called Winter Wheat. Did you ever
yeah,
visit Winter Wheat? And I would just go in the
yeah,
greenhouse and they'd have blankets and I just bundle up and work on my case notes or do whatever. And they just come in and quietly put a tea beside me and cookies and let me just hang out there and do some work
yeah,
and go for a walk in their forest. And also there's Pinecroft. And I had the pleasure of staying there for 6 weeks when I was starting one of my positions before. And just magical, beautiful places where you can just be in the quiet, so close to the city, but it feels so far
yeah,
away.
yeah. And you don't know that you're that close.
Yeah.
They have a fantastic menu too right now too. Their
Yes, they
fall
do.
comfort food.
You'll have to have some for me. I haven't been to Pinecroft in quite a while, but
Yeah,
definitely one of my favorite spots. And actually, that Pinecroft used to be my runaway place for writing. I would book Pinecroft for a weekend or whatever because they've got the cabin. And I just go
yeah,
because they didn't have great cell service. They didn't have great Wi-Fi in
no,
there. And I was like, perfect. So I just go and I would write and work on some things that needed some quiet because back then the kids were all little. So having 5 kids under feet when you're trying to write, it's not always easy. So yeah,
not always easy.
that was one of my my little secret places that I would go. So now you know 2 of them.
Well, in and around where I live in St. Thomas, there are so many small conservation areas that you could just go and have a nice walk, right? And the parking lot may be crowded. It may have 50 cars in it, and you may never pass a person as you're walking,
Yeah.
which I think, me and my dog tropping along, talking to ourselves and spirit as we go.
What a blessing, eh? I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
I love that. So shifting from this space of fear, what are some things that you are aware of when you go into a fear space and how do you pull yourself out of it?
This is a tough one for me, but I'm going to say it. I keep my mouth shut. And I think that's the biggest one. I have to learn to shut up and not engage in a space of fear, right? And once you shut your mouth and you don't talk, then lots of times that, you can back away easily from something. But it's once you start open your mouth, you bring it all in
Yeah.
or let it all out, either one.
Have a conscious value to them and an emotional value to them and a spiritual value to them. So you're totally right. When we allow our vibration to come out of our mouth, if it's not resonating what we're calling in, we're going to attract what we're putting out. So I
Right?
love that you put the, and you know what, that's a unique answer. I don't often hear that answer, but I think it's a really great one. And it's funny, in not so many words, I share that often with like my kids or whatever. I'll say, God gave you 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, my friend,
Right?
and
And
it's
I
so
say to my kids who are adults now, I still say to them, they'll say something's bothering them, blah, blah, blah. I say, did you use your words? Right? Because instead of getting your dander up and snarling, why don't you try using your words first and see? Because you may get a different outcome than
yes,
what you were expecting.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
you use your nice words.
Well, it's so interesting. I believe it's Sharon Klinger in one of her books. I'm very confident. If I can remember, I'll write it down in the show notes here. But she was saying, doing an activity like saying the word strong when you pick something up, you actually feel stronger when you pick up the item. Like doing things like that.
Right?
And, words, whether we say them out loud or think them, have such power in our whole energetics. So that's why it's so important as well to keep the self-talk and the ego in check as well.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what so long ago, what did they tell you? To stand in front of the mirror and say, I love myself.
Yeah.
And eventually you will come to it, right? You love yourself.
Yep. I do that with my
And
coaching students. I do that with my mediumship students. It's so valuable.
right? And it's an I love myself, period.
Yes.
Not I love myself, but
Yeah. Or when.
yeah,
Yeah. I love
because that's what a lot of people do, right? But I have 50 pounds extra, or I have this, or I have that. Instead, you have to say, I love myself, period.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah, Louise Hay was such a gift to our world, bringing forward mirror work. And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's very, very powerful. And I know some of my coaching clients too, they'll be like, oh, the mirror work. But then when they come forward, they're like, okay, yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm doing better with it. It helps us to feel better. And well, if we can look at ourselves and speak our truth, we can look at anybody and speak the truth, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
I love
funny that you said that because in your little notes that you sent about this, you said a quote, and I was sitting here thinking this morning, and I thought, well, when my kids were young and they would fight or something would happen, I used to say to them, to thine own self be true. And so this morning I was thinking about that, and I thought, that's Shakespeare. I don't think that my kids really got the drift of that, at that age. But my son has a tattoo that says that because he heard it so many times that he got that. And so this morning I was just looking up the whole quote to see, what the whole quote from Shakespeare was. So, and then they sort of gave a preface on it because you can't be false to any man if you are true to yourself.
so true. So true.
Right?
And I love that you taught your kids that. Would you like to know what I did with my kids when they were fighting? We
What?
drove out to California, and you would think that 3 teenagers would bicker a lot, but they actually did really, really well. It wasn't until the last quarter they started getting feisty with each other. And so I was like, oh, it sounds like you guys aren't getting along well. Here, let's listen to Wayne Dyer. And I put a Wayne Dyer CD in for 4 hours. And then if they start bickering, I'm like, oh, do you know what? No worries. It's okay. I have another one. Let's listen to more Wayne Dyer. so they got along very well after the second CD. But
Right?
that stuff sticks, just like your son with the tattoo. I know sometimes
Right?
kids will come back and say, oh, remember when we used to do this thing? Like, I really enjoy doing that. I still do that now, which is really nice.
Yeah.
We don't always consciously realize how much we influence others by what we say, as you mentioned, but also what we partake in, what we listen to or watch or all of that. People are noticing those small cues too.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I had people come into my work one time, and the lady said to me, she goes, "Do you know why we come in here?" And I was like, "No," because quite frankly, like, you're coming in a lot. And she goes, "It's because you are always smiling." And I was like, "Okay. So you're not coming for my wisdom. You're not coming for, the tea that I'm putting out. You're just coming because I'm smiling." And that was a huge compliment. At the time, I was sort of like, okay,
Can
taken a
you
little aback.
imagine? Can you imagine what a happy society we would be if there was a smile office where people could just come in and get a hug and a smile and a cup of tea? I think
Right? I
that would,
think they need it. They
yes.
need it.
There you go,
I
government.
think,
Put our tax dollars on that baby.
well, with our kids, the teachers are not allowed to touch them and give them a hug. And yet in seniors' homes and hospice, now they're hugging people because they need it. And that's part of healing. And we sort of have a disconnect that both of those groups of people don't need to be hugged,
Yes.
right? Like, it does not make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I was in teachers college, of course, we had that conversation around we don't hug the children and things like that. Well, I taught grade one and part-time in kindergarten, helped out in the kindergarten. Those little 6-year-olds sometimes don't give you choice. They're running up and they're giving you a hug. But I will tell you,
Right?
even my grade fours would run up. I can remember one time in particular, I'd done a grade 4 placement in teachers college. And so they were having a track and field day, and I was the one that had helped them prepare for track and field. So I thought, I'm going to go. Placement was over. And those grade 4s, boys and girls, ran across that field as soon as they saw me coming. How do you not hug them back? Right? Like,
Right?
yes, of
Exactly.
course we are appropriate. We don't, initiate with other people's children. I get that. I get that. But hugs and touch are crucial to our development at every single age.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I do, even with my clients that are going through struggles in marriage, is I just have them hold hands and touch each other. You don't have to say a word, but just hold each other's hand while you.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's amazing. Sometimes that's literally all they need. And they'll say to me off over and over again, we've been sitting on the same couch for 20 years, but it felt like it was miles away. Right? Because that
Yeah.
touch, there's nonverbal communication going on through the energetic vibration. It's so important. So I love that you mentioned that.
Exactly, right? And they say when you hold hands like this, the heartbeat of your pulse is in the palm of your hands. So
Yeah.
your heart's beating together, right? What could be more beautiful?
Absolutely. And when you think about our loved ones crossing over, often that's the position, right, of our hand.
Right? That
It's
we
not
hold.
like
Yeah,
this. It's like this. And
it's
when
like this.
spirit comes
Yeah.
in, that's how spirit holds hands too, is like this. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. Yeah. So
Yeah.
touching a little bit on the fear part again, because you have such a unique work that you do with people. And so many people come to me with readings and stuff, and they'll share that they are frightened of death, that they are afraid of death, or they're afraid of spirit. What are some of the things that you've noticed, and how do you navigate that when people have those types of fears?
Well, it's tough because so many different religions teach so many different things. And I usually start by asking people when they're afraid, what do they believe in, first of all?
I
And
love
do they believe in God? Because some sort of belief in God or, a higher power is the basis in lots of cases of what they fear, right? And what they fear most times is that they haven't been good enough in their life to get them to the good place. Because
Yeah,
that's what people hear, right? And they don't,
absolutely.
I guess, I was raised Catholic, not that I practice. And I'm a firm believer that organized religion and God are two entirely different things. That the church is trying to sell you the God, just like, the guy selling the vacuum at the door. So, and I believe that God forgives us. So I don't, not that you want to go through your life being a bad person, because there are going to be repercussions to that. But no matter what, we're all going to the same place.
Yes.
And we're going to be elevated there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The two guarantees in life, death and taxes, right?
Taxes, right?
And, it's interesting because in all of these years of connecting with spirit through readings, so which is over 30 years at this point for me, I've never had spirit come to me and say, I wasn't good enough. Or
right? Exactly.
absolutely come forward with remorse for some things that they did. But never once has spirit said to me, hey, there's a big guy here and I can't go any further because I did something wrong. It's just never happened in my experience.
It's never happened.
I don't know of any other mediums it's happened with either.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, we have natural law to keep us in check. And certainly karma is a real thing.
Yeah.
But I really believe our own souls are judging us much hard, like not necessarily
much harder than everybody else.
Our ego is judging us much harder, but our soul carries that for healing. And
yeah.
And yeah, so it's a very interesting thing. And so many people carry around that manufactured guilt that's not even real guilt. It's just that they think they're supposed to be guilty. I had
feel it, right?
tell me, oh, I feel so guilty because I killed so-and-so's plants. And I said, oh, like, did you take the lawnmower to them? Or she's like, no. I was like, oh, did you get like a scissors from the kitchen and cut them all up? And she was, no. And I said, well, what on earth happened? And she said, well, it went below freezing and they died. And I said, I need help because I don't understand. I don't understand what you did that caused guilt. And she said, well, I just feel bad. I said, is it the same thing though? And I asked this and I use this example because we've been programmed this word guilt, especially as women.
Yeah.
Right? Hold that word guilt. And when we learn what guilt actually looks like if you're calling for an alibi, you probably should feel guilty.
Right? Malicious intent.
Exactly. But when we are not responsible for a frost. We're just not. I don't know anybody who can fix that. But I don't say this to put her on the spot. I say this because I think as women, we need to be more gentle with ourselves. And actually the men too. The men are holding a whole lot on a whole other level, right?
Yeah.
But being able to understand that we're doing the best that we can. And on the other side of this human experience, that's not the time for punishment at that time.
I have 6 grandkids. And so I watch my kids and I watch them, with their expectations with my grandkids. And I think to myself, I might have done that to them, which is why they're doing that. But their expectation for excellence. And I said to them, you know what? Be gentler because they're learning. And every person on this earth is learning something new every day as we go forward. And we can't expect excellence.
Absolutely.
We can expect, right? Our expectations are for love and for kindness.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Years ago on a performance evaluation, my supervisor wrote, has high expectation of herself and others. And at the time, my younger self thought that was a beautiful compliment. That's where I was at that point in my life. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, I was so hard on myself, we are
and consequently then you become hard on the people around you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And my ex-husband would probably say that I was too hard. Right? That my expectations were up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can't do anything about that now. I was where I
No,
was for a reason. Um, Likely because I was a teen mom and really hard on myself about having to achieve, right? But
yeah,
we we're constantly in this human existence going through that cycle of learning, falling, growing, mastery. And as soon as you
right?
think you figured out, the universe will let you know you don't know a darn thing and start all over again.
Well, because you know what? I mean, society's expectations for excellence are very hard on people and huge, right? But isn't the whole purpose of this life to continue learning your lessons to elevate your soul? So therefore, you're going to, fall down, learn your lesson, do it again, you know, until you achieve it. And then once you've achieved it, then it's time to learn to the next step,
Yeah. And I
right?
would just add one more thing into our cycle that we're talking about, and that is celebrating when we learn.
When we learn,
Celebrate when we fall down. Hey, I learned how to fall down. I'm not going to do it that way next time.
right? And I've learned to roll the next time,
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love
right?
that.
We do it with babies, but we stop doing it at a certain age, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the first time when they go and have a little pee on the potty, we're all cheer, cheer, cheer. And at some point, we quit cheering for them.
Yeah.
When they walk, they cheer, then we stop.
I would say that I'll go home tonight and cheer when Chloe goes into the washroom, but I think she'll be a little weirded out when she comes out if I'm cheering.
You
But
have to
I'll leave
say,
you with that
Chloe,
vision, right? Because
I'm
I'm sure
glad
you
you're
can
still
imagine.
peeing on the toilet. We aren't celebrating so much when they're senior citizens and they're peeing their pants.
And yet we all go there too at some point, right? Oh
Right?
my goodness. I'm having a giggle too because when Lesley and I stayed up way past bedtime, laughing much like this, my Brooklyn came down and kind of like looked at us and said, "I'm going to bed now. I'm going to turn off the light. I'm going to go to bed." And we both looked at her, we're like, "We'll be here a while if you need us."
Right? We're like, good night. Yeah, Brooklyn was being the parent.
Yes, yes, my mini
Yeah,
me in many ways. Absolutely.
right?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So, if you could share some of your most fascinating stories, and I want to preface, I know with confidentiality you can't give names and all that, but what are some really, really cool experiences or stories you've had with spirit and genealogy?
Um, well, I can tell you an interesting one without sharing any names. And some of them, they're interesting, but do have a little bit of lots of times it's adopted kids who want to find their family.
Yes.
So sometimes it doesn't always work out quite the way you expected. But I had an interesting case once where I had a gentleman who was adopted and he did his DNA. And lo and behold, I personally knew the mother. And he had played hockey for 20 years with his biological brothers and never knew.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so it can go bad or it can go good because he was put up for adoption for a reason, right? But I think like in the beginning, he had a lot of anger and a lot of like low self-esteem issues because why was I given up? And that's what a lot of kids are, like want in their head to know why they weren't wanted because that sticks with them for a lot of years. Anyways, so once we figured out who his mother was, then we had to sit down and decide and how best to approach the family since he already had a, a full connection with his aunt, his biological aunt, who he had camped with, his biological brothers, who he played hockey with. He knew his biological mother, not his father, though. That wasn't the woman that his mom was married to, was not his biological father. And so that was kind of an interesting navigational thing, because he was immersed in their lives already.
Now, did they realize that he was theirs, or was it a surprise to everybody?
It was a surprise to them.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a surprise to them. Now, after some discussion, we decided that he should approach the aunt and tell her. And so he just sort of went, that I did my DNA and blah, 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 blah. And this is what I found out. And she knew that her sister had given a baby up. So she was the mediator to talk to the sister and, say, but I mean, what a connection for that man, that he was already so ingrained with his family. And they shared a lot of the same values and, with him, which was kind of nice. And
I love that they got to have shared experiences, even though it wasn't as that role of family.
Yeah. So that was kind of nice. A couple times I have done the research and helped somebody, and then we found out that there was a child. Not always as good.
Do you know that comes up in readings too? I'll be giving a reading and I'll say, okay, would you understand the connection with the adoption? And people are like, there's no adoption in my family. I'm like, okay, no problem. And my role is to trust spirit. So if they don't want to hear it, that's okay, we can stop it right there. But if they're curious, I can ask spirit for more information. And there's been multiple times people have called me and said, I thought you were nuts and didn't know a darn thing when you said that somebody was adopted. And I just asked the question and found out, and sure enough, validated it. And so that beautiful gift of spirit coming in and saying, no, there's part of our family that needs love too. And it's just beautiful.
Well, and I think that it's, I've dealt with some mothers who have given up their children. And I think it's hard because when you've given up one child and you've kept others, how do you initiate the conversation to say, I made these mistakes, what I felt were mistakes at the time, right? And I couldn't manage to keep this child. And then we talk about the guilt and the shame, right? Which society puts on people. You're not just going to open that with your kids. Like, you certainly can't tell them when they're 5. So when they get to be adults, then it's even harder, because then your kids, you feel like, will judge you.
Yes.
Right? So, and then people internalize that and keep that. And that guilt is huge. And then we fall into, like, mental health issues and physical health issues, because you're holding on to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Some of the deepest healing I think I've ever seen happen in a reading is around moms who've had to give up their child for adoption, or they've chosen to have an abortion. And there's so much guilt that they've been carrying for so many years. And then for that child to come through spirit, or for maybe grandma to come and apologize for forcing the mom to give up the child.
Yeah.
And just the whole, they leave standing taller. Just that acknowledgement of, we do the best we can with what we've got, and you're still a good mom. You're still a good person. You still have a good heart. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think that's, obviously all readings can be super healing, but I think that that's some of the most healing that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's nice. Like, people need that to move forward, right? That internal forgiveness to go forward. So yeah, that's a lot of what I do. I sit with people. I love to go through their pictures, and I'm fastidious about it. If you've got a picture and you haven't written on the back who it is, that's a no-no.
Yeah, and you know what? We laugh, but I have pictures that I have not written on the back of. I did go through my scrapbooking phase while the kids were growing up, but I've fallen out of that. But
Yeah,
it's it's a good practice. I think that that's a great thing to do. You know, we're in January. It's a great thing. Just a nice Saturday morning, get a cozy blanket, some snacks and tea, and pull out a box of photos and go through.
right. And sit
We
there,
all know somebody who's looked at a picture, said, "Oh, who's that? Oh, well, that's my mom." No, it's not. It's Aunt so and so, right? We've all had that
right?
experience, I think.
Well, it's interesting. My ex-mother-in-law a few years ago gave my children all a book of the pictures that she had of them because she was downsizing. And then I was looking at the book and I was like, oh, that's wrong. That's not, no, that's not. And my kids are like, how do you know? And I said, this is me because they weren't written on the back. I said, well, I remember that I painted the living room this color when Ethan was born, and it was this color when Jeffrey was born, who are a year apart and looked very much alike as babies. So I know that this is that picture, and that's, well, nobody else is going to know that but me.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So yes, I love that idea. Get the names on the back of the photos,
That's
and
the
I would
names
even
on them.
say the year and location, if you have that too, can be so helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I had what 83 years of pictures from my grandmother that have been sitting in my parents' basement waiting to be sorted through. And there's probably 10,000 pictures with no names on them. So that has, made me even more conscious of that, especially the fact that a bunch of them are old pictures. And I would like to be absolutely positive
Yeah.
at doing my own genealogy that I've got the right people with the right pictures,
Yeah. That's a
so.
great idea. So, what would you say are the best ways to approach starting genealogy? So, if people want to get started on their own, how would they first get started with that?
Well, I would say that they should get a program, which I personally like Family Tree Maker because it's just very simple. And you start with yourself and you put in what you know. And then you work your way forward what you know, and then you prove what you don't know or search what you don't know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to cost you a dime because there is lots of free resources in every community, right? All through Canada, all through the world, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So, when you're doing genealogy, whether that be in your family line or when you're helping other people, what intuitive messages do you get if you know there's somebody else that's missing, or how does that work for you to get those extra missing pieces that nobody's physically validating?
Intuitively, I guess what I do is I start to look at where the people were living, and I think I get it without really knowing that I'm getting it intuitively, right? Because I build their life with the news of the time,
Yes.
right? Which, like, you have to look at what was happening in their world and measure it by their standards, not by today's standards and how we work.
I think that is so important to remember, and definitely in mediumship as well. We can't just take something and then apply it to 2025 standards, right? That's a
Right?
really
And
good.
we do, and we try to look at that. Like, I mean, you want to look at somebody who has 10 kids and wonder how they manage. Well, first of all, what choice did they have? If they were in a happy relationship, they're going to be sharing intimate relations. They weren't going to stop them. And they might have been able to use what they called, sheep gut condoms, back then if they were rich. So if they had enough money, they would be able to do that. But if they were, just your regular average poor farmer, they didn't have that option, because the intestines that they would have used for one thing, they were making food with for another. So those are important things I think that you need to bring in with your genealogy and look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too, like using mediumship as a reference, I experience sometimes where people will come through letting me know that they didn't get to grieve a child, for example, because there was a lot of child and infant death
Yeah,
in previous generations, which we don't experience the same way now. And so
no, and
there aren't the markings and the records. It's just somebody might remember, oh, I think we had a younger sister or something like that, but they don't really have the context.
and I find in lots of families, if you just watch the years, you can see, right?
Yes.
You can see if there's a 7-month baby for the first one. And I always joke with people, because I say the first baby can come anytime after the wedding, but the second baby always takes 9 months,
Yes.
right?
So true. So true. Absolutely.
So, because people are so judgmental. Well, that didn't happen then. There was no illegitimacy. There was not this. Of course there was. They're humans. We're not no new species that were, promiscuous any more than they were then. We just share it on Facebook now.
So true. So true. So true. Well, let's fast forward a little bit from the past, from our ancestry into 2025. What do you see as some of the big themes or struggles or even rewards coming up for us over the next year?
Right.
Putting you on the
What do
spot.
I, right? You put me on the spot. I think that our world, is in a huge state of flux for people. And I think the journey next year will be people trying to find financially where they're at. I know there's so much mental health, and that's just a result of how people are living their lives.
Yeah,
And I think people need to find simplicity,
absolutely.
right? And less stuff, which I think, and not that I give COVID a lot of credit, because the actual disease itself, but the time period of those 3 years when people were afraid of living, they've sort of come out of the shell, but they've looked at now how we're living. So
Yeah,
they're looking at where we're getting our food, how our sources are happening, where our money's flowing, where our goods come from. And I think that that's where we're going to see a change in people. I
yeah,
think you're going to see that a pendulum starts to move in that, and that people are more conscious about, how they're sourcing stuff for in their lives.
absolutely. And you know what? I think that this is another entry point into the genealogy because, this modern way of living has really just been since the 80s, really. This
Oh, absolutely.
materialism and everybody has abundance of everything of the stuff. But when we look at our ancestors and look at how did they live, even those who were wealthy still had their prized possessions. They didn't have stuff everywhere necessarily, right?
Oh, no, not
And
like we
so
have today.
I think it's another really beautiful entry point into the genealogy where they can sit with their grandmothers of the past and say, okay, now how did you do this?
Yeah. Yeah, because how did our grandmothers with 10 children manage to get the laundry done, the meals done? And, did they work? Of course they worked. Any woman who's kept a home knows that that's a lot of work, and raise your kids.
Yeah.
That's a job, right? And we do it 24/7. And they survived. They got their own water. They didn't have their automatic washing machine, their refrigerators. I mean, most, in the 30s and the 40s, some people still had ice boxes. Some people did not have a flush toilet,
Yep.
even in the province of Ontario, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and we don't realize how we've commercialized, I guess, our worlds to make our lives simpler, and yet then we can't manage.
Yes. Because it really wasn't that long ago that these things were in existence that you're talking about.
I know, right? I mean, you and I are not that old, but I bet you we can both remember the wringer washer when you got to pull those clothes and feed
Yep.
them through those two,
Yep. And the party line for the phone and
right? I loved that when I was a kid.
absolutely. And so I'm thinking, looking at, I'm going to encourage everybody, look at your genealogy and
Yeah,
ask intuitively, what do I need to know from my ancestors? What do I need to know? What can I learn from them? And certainly I encourage you to follow Lesley because she can give you lots of tips and strategies on how to get going with that. And certainly you can always ask her to be a helper in your genealogical journey as well. But I think there's a lot for us as we embark on this future that none of us have ever lived before. We are entering a world of AI, of technology, of geographic and political spectrum we've never ever seen before. And there's so much unknown, but our tools and our resources are still within grasp from the past. And I think a lot of them
absolutely.
come into
Yeah.
play for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So what would you say is the biggest tip for people who are navigating 2025? Maybe they are struggling with some of the things you talk about. They're struggling with fear around poverty. They're struggling with fear around the money shifts, or maybe they're struggling with some mental health. What are some things that you can suggest that they can incorporate into their life to make their life a little easier?
First of all, I would tell them to smile. Find it every day and smile. And secondly, I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't expect perfection. Just accept that sometimes 50% or maybe 51% is good enough,
Yes.
and it will get you through. And you know what? Tomorrow is always a better day.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. You remind me when I used to coach in direct sales and be in direct sales, I would my my customer base back when we actually made phone calls. I'd say, making your client calls. And they, the ones that really struggled with it, I'd say, are you smiling? And they'd say, well, I don't know, probably not. I'm having to make phone calls. And so I would get them to get the little makeup mirror, put it in front of them, practice smiling while they're making a phone call. Because not only will you feel better, but that vibrational energy of the smile helps everybody around you feel better too.
Well, when I worked at the cemetery and I would have the summer students come into the office, and I'd ask them, what's the most important thing you can say when you answer the phone? And they would come out all with all manner of things. And I said, just smile in your voice. Because if you're smiling, that makes the person on the other end of the line feel it. They can feel it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. There's a resonance. We feel that smile. We feel
Exactly.
that, and
it resonates through.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of the day, we all need that. I always say smile on the happy days, but smile even more on the sad ones.
On the sad days. Yeah.
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 Awesome. Now, Lesley, how can everybody find you who's watching this and they're wanting some more Lesley in their life?
They can find me at lesleybuchanan.ca on a website. They can contact me through Facebook or Instagram. I have both, and it's just Lesley Buchanan, Lesley.
Yes.
And then they'll find me.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much for being
Thank
here
you.
with us today and being a part of the summit. I always love spending time with you, and I'm so excited to share you with all our viewers. So thanks so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, Sam.
All right, everyone. I hope you are really enjoying the summit, and we would love to know what exactly you are loving the most. Be sure to go check Lesley out and all our other speakers, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.